bring in Jeff Passan, the baseball columnist for Yahoo Sports, and got my attention with Yasiel Puig, the Dodgers outfielder, and how do we get him into the All-Star game. People ask me, and in fact, I got a phone call on Friday where somebody said, well, why don't you talk more baseball? I said, I don't know what I can really talk about that plays nationally. But Puig is somebody who is playing nationally. There's a little Fernando mania in here. How does he get on the All-Star team where you don't have the purist fighting back?
Unfortunately, he doesn't, because I'll tell you what, the backlash from that column was ridiculous. And I think my point got a little bit lost. I really do think it did. My point was this. Baseball is a sport that struggles so much for individual recognition and to develop that superstar. Basketball, by nature of its sport, it is a superstar-driven sport. Football, by the fact that it is just the most pervasive large entity in American sports and probably even world sports, will develop that star. But baseball has trouble doing that. And so when you have a guy like Puig who comes up and sets the league on fire and makes Vin Scully, a guy who's been doing this for 60 years, come up with words that I've never heard him speak before. When Vin Scully is saying things about this guy, you need to give him a national audience. And the fact that he's been around for a couple weeks, so what? People want to watch Yasiel Puig, and baseball should bend over backward getting him into the All-Star game, even if it means angering fans and players, because ultimately, in the long term, this game should be about the fans and what they want to see.
Yeah, but Jeff, here's the problem. You got the Fox attachment here to this game has to count because then people will watch because the World Series is at stake. If we got rid of that nonsense, do you think you could put Puig in the All-Star game and you wouldn't have this kind of backlash?
I always try and operate in a world where logic is the determining factor on things. I'm telling you what, I hate the fact that there's no replay in Major League Baseball, but the single dumbest thing that has happened under Bud Selig's reign is making the All-Star game ostensibly count for something. And the fact that you took what is truly an exhibition, where pitchers don't pitch what they normally do, where hitters don't play as long as they normally do, where where Randy Johnson can throw at John Kruk and John Kruk puts his helmet on backward. When you do that and turn that into something that has tangible meaning, it's such a joke and such a misuse of power. And it's too bad, because you're right. I think that is one of the things that is keeping a guy from Puig from being in, not just in the All-Star game, but I'd love to see the guy in the home run derby too. I mean, derby's become the dunk contest in that it's just too long and extended and boring. And if they could take the derby and make it about distance rather than the number of home runs, I think Puig could be a guy who hits the ball 500 feet.
Is he a sure thing, though, Jeff?
Oh, furthest thing from a sure thing. I mean, there's such boom or bust potential there. Look, the guy physically is off the charts talented. I mean, he's 6'3", 245 pounds. He runs, not as well as Mike Trout, but he runs really well. He's got power similar to Giancarlo Stanton and similar to Bryce Harper. He's learned to take a walk down at Double-A, it seems, something that was a big question. He's got an arm like Vladimir Guerrero and like Bo Jackson and like so many of those uber-talented guys. And so when you have that set of tools, you've got a potential superstar, but there are questions about his makeup. There are questions about what money is going to do to him. And look, that's just going to work itself out over time. You're going to see if at 22 years old he can actually grow into the type of mature player you need to let those tools blossom.
How much of a story is the disappointment of players and teams this year?
What do you mean?
The Angels, the Nationals. I mean,
okay.
I look at stories that have to play across the country, and sometimes you do focus on the negative more than the positive. But the Nationals and the Angels, you got Strasburg, I got Hamilton, I got Pujols. Is that where does that rank as far as stories in baseball right now?
I think it's right up there, frankly, toward the top. I mean, look, Miguel Cabrera and Chris Davis are both having incredible years, but Miguel Cabrera is a guy who I think the language barrier, frankly, does get in the way, and it's unfortunate, and it's something that baseball has to contend with, but you don't see Latin American players put out there by the media, and it's our fault in some respects, but it's also the fault of the American public. I think that's loath to embrace a guy like that. And so someone like Cabrera, what he's doing is historically wonderful and amazing and doesn't get the credit because of that. On the other hand, the Angels have gone and spent $360 million over the last 2 years on Albert Pujols and Josh Hamilton. They've got guys hitting 240 and 210 respectively. That's not good. And to see the Dodgers failure, to see the Angels failure, to see the Nationals playing just about 500 ball at this point, I think you're absolutely onto something, and that the disappointments of those big money, big market, big name teams may be the biggest story that there's been this year.
And I also look at when baseball takes the basketball blueprint and says, let's just bring stars together, and of course everybody's going to play nice and we're going to have champions, the Dodgers and the Angels, where I look at the Cardinals. The Cardinals are similar to the San Antonio Spurs. They're just a great infrastructure. Even you change a manager and you bring in somebody and replace a Hall of Famer, they let Pujols go. They knew what they were doing. They have pitching, they have defense, they have hitters. There's just a smartness to them where they don't try to take a shortcut.
I think the San Antonio comparison is perfect because it's a small market, too. I mean, we're not talking about major television revenues. The Cardinals' television contract is awful. And so that's put the impetus on them. And very similarly, the Atlanta Braves. And I'm here in Atlanta right now today to watch the Braves take on the Mets. And Matt Harvey and Zach Wheeler are both pitching for the Mets. And you see the Braves right now, I think something like 15 games ahead of the Mets. And the Mets have more resources. The Mets have New York City. The Mets have everything. But the Braves, even though they don't have that TV money, and even though they're in a market that doesn't support them as well as it should, are still there year in and year out. Like the Cardinals, that goes back to scouting, goes back to player development, and it goes back to doing things the absolute right way. And you know what? They have really smart people running their organization and really smart evaluators who bring in that talent. It's not just hitting on that first-round pick. It's hitting on the 6th and the 8th and in international free agency and in all those other respects that a winning baseball franchise needs these days.
Keep fighting the good fight, Jeff. Thanks for joining us.
I'll do it the best I can, Dan. Thanks for having me on, man.
Jeff Passan from Yahoo Sports.